2 new states had been added. The murder rate in proportion to population in 1960 was half of what it had been in 1934. Every one of these beneficial trends sharply reversed after liberal notions gained ascendancy during the 1960s. By 1974, the murder rate had doubled. Even liberal icon Sargent Shriver, head of the agency directing the War on Poverty, admitted that venereal disease has skyrocketed, even though we have had more clinics, more pills, and more sex education than ever in history. Liberals looking back on the 1960s take special pride in their role on racial issues, for civil rights laws and the advancement of blacks out of poverty. Those riots that threatened to tear the country apart were race riots, and supposedly the liberals saved us all. But what do the facts show? Both the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 had a higher percentage of congressional Republicans voting for their enactment than the percentage of congressional Democrats. You can check it out in the congressional record. As for black economic advances, the most dramatic reduction in poverty among blacks occurred between 1940 and 1960, when the black poverty rate was cut almost in half, without any major government programs of the Great Society kind that began in the 1960s. Liberals love to point to the rise of blacks out of poverty since 1960 as proof of the benefits of liberal programs, as if the continuation of a trend that began decades earlier was proof of how liberals saved blacks. As for saving the country from riots, the facts show the direct opposite. It was precisely when liberals were in power that riots rocked cities across the country. There were never as many riots during the 2 presidential terms of Ronald Reagan as during one term of Lyndon Johnson. Even during the 1960s, riots were far more common and deadly in liberal bastions like New York City than in Chicago, where the original Mayor Daley announced on television that he had given his police orders to shoot to kill if riots broke out. Daley was demonized for saying such a thing, even though Chicago did not have the loss of life suffered in liberal cities where mayors pandered to grievance mongers and pleaded for restraint. In other words, the net effect was that Daley saved lives, while liberals saved their vision.